Ladies and gentlemen, the Old Head Radio app. A radio station completely curated by Old Head. Nothing but Old Head approved bangers all day, every day. Everything from well-loved classics to lesser-known deep cuts to underappreciated gems to modern-day bangers from all across the spectrum of rock and metal-related genres and subgenres. Also, the home of the live radio show Old Head Bangers Ball. Download the app now for iPhone or Android. Just search Old Head Radio. And we hope you enjoy the bangers. Somehow it's already June? Okay, well, welcome to 40 years ago this month, June 1985. I swear, back then, all of these things happened, and it just felt like it was such a long time in between all these things, and you had to wait around for all these different things to happen and things to come out. And now that I'm doing these episodes, I'm just like, man, everything was just so crammed together all the way through the 80s and the 90s. And maybe for the younger people, that's how it feels for this decade, century, whatever as well. But for me, it feels like a nice breather. There's still some cool stuff happening, but now you get a lot of time to reflect, just like we are today. So as usual, we start off with the number one singles for the month of June 1985. And still hanging on from last month, for the first week of June, the number one single was Whatever She Wants. Nope. Everything She Wants. Same thing, really, by Wham. But then, for the next 2 weeks of June 1985, a song was number one, and it's another one of those songs that to me is just one of the most iconic 80s songs. If you made a compilation of the quintessential 80s pop songs, this one should definitely be on it. Tears for Fears, Everybody Wants to Rule the World. I remember getting this album on cassette and being obsessed with it, and it's remained a favorite of mine ever since. But there's something about, Everybody Wants to Rule the World, that particular song, that just the sound of the synthesizer at the beginning of the song, it just feels like the 1980s. And I feel like those of you who weren't even there, you probably get what I'm saying. You feel the 1980s in there. Anyway, amazing song, but somehow it was only number one for 2 weeks. And then the last 2 weeks, because this was one of those weird months where there were 5 Fridays, I guess, and I don't know, maybe that's how they measured it. I don't know. Either way, there was a new number one song for the last 2 weeks of June 1985, and that was Heaven by Bryan Adams. Not really a go-to Bryan Adams song for me. When you mention Bryan Adams' name, even though this was a massive hit and well-known, it's not a song that I immediately think of when I think of Bryan Adams. He's got several others that I would think of first. And I guess that's a good problem for Mr. Adams. You got too many hits that I can't think of all of them right away. All right, so that wraps up the top singles of June 1985. Let's move on to the top albums of June 1985. For the first 3 weeks, the number one album in the US was Around the World in a Day by Prince and the Revolution. I feel like this isn't one that gets talked about a lot because it followed Purple Rain, I believe, and Purple Rain was fucking massive. And then this one had a massive hit. Raspberry Beret is on this album, and it was successful. Obviously, it was number one for 3 weeks, but I feel like the legacy of this album, it's one that kind of gets overshadowed by 1999 and Purple Rain. But still fucking Prince. I mean, come on. I guess at that point, this was his 7th album. So dude had already been kicking it for a little bit. And for the rest of the month, the number one album in the US, I got my vinyl for this one. It was the Beverly Hills Cop soundtrack. Let's look at the track list of this thing. It's got New Attitude by Patti LaBelle. That's a banger. Don't Get Stopped in Beverly Hills by Shalimar. I feel like if you know the soundtrack, you know that one. Do You Really Want My Love by Junior? I can't even remember that one, and I've heard this soundtrack tons of times. Emergency by Rocky Robbins. Whatever happened to fucking Rocky Robbins? And wrapping up side one, Neutron Dance by the Pointer Sisters. Jeez. And then we got the heavy hitters on side B. The Heat Is On by Glenn Frey. That's the selling point of the album right there. One of two, I believe. And then we have Gratitude by Danny Elfman. I guess he did some pop songs as a solo artist. We got another Patti LaBelle with Stir It Up. Rock and Roll Me Again by The System. And then wrapping it all up, Mr. Harold Faltermeyer with the Beverly Hills Cop theme, or Axel F, which, come on. That also goes on the quintessential 80s songs playlist. Anyway, we talked about this movie earlier in this year because it came out earlier this year, but apparently it took a little while for the soundtrack to catch on. But the soundtrack is a lot of fun as well, if you didn't know. So the Beverly Hills Cop soundtrack was the last 2 weeks of June 1985, #1 album in the country. Remember when soundtracks were #1 albums? When's the last time that happened? And that's a nice little segue because that leads us into the #1 movies in the country for June 1985. For the first 3 weeks, a holdover from last month, well-deserved in my opinion, Rambo First Blood Part 2. I feel like I talked about this movie enough in the last episode. I love it, and it was very popular. After this movie, I believe, is when they made a Rambo cartoon and action figures. Remember, that's another thing from the 80s that I kind of miss, where they would make toys and cartoons for R-rated movies because they knew that we were all watching them. Why not cash in on us stupid kids that love shit like this? Because really, at the end of the day, yeah, it's an R-rated movie, but who's enjoying Rambo more than fucking 10-year-old kids? Come on. Definitely not the people that went to see this next movie. The #1 movie for the 4th week of June 1985 was Cocoon. And this may be shocking to some of you, but I've never seen this movie, nor did I ever want to. So I know there's old people. I think there's some sort of sci-fi element to it. That's about it. And I remember it too. It was a cultural thing. People talked about Cocoon, and I've seen scenes from it, but that's as far as it goes for me. And this last movie, forget about it. I didn't even know that it existed. For the last week of June 1985, The Pale Rider with Clint Eastwood, apparently directed by and starring Clint Eastwood. And once again, I also have no interest in seeing most Clint Eastwood movies, so didn't see that one. And that's not a very 80s movie or an 80s looking movie poster either. They really fucked up. I guess they didn't. The movie was #1. What the fuck do I know? What I do know is that a movie that did not reach #1, it reached #2 in the country, which is baffling to me at this point, was a movie that I was obsessed with, and everyone somewhere around my age was also obsessed with this movie, and that movie came out in June 1985. June 7th, to be exact, and that movie was The fucking Goonies. Now, I got a lot of love for this movie, but I have to admit that over the years, the people who are still kind of obsessed with this movie are just as frightening as Disney adults. And so I step away a little bit. If in your bio it says Goonies never say die, I'm like, oh, maybe I won't follow this person. But either way, I've seen the Goonies many times over the years, and I think it very much holds up for the kind of movie that it is, which is an absolute blast. And this movie came out June 7th, 1985. All right, moving on to the albums released in June of 1985. Got more to talk about this time than we did last month, so let's get right to it. This album was released in May in the UK, apparently, but didn't come out until June 12th in the US. And that is the debut album from Megadeth, Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good. Can you see that? You see how it says it on the back? And I know I've said it in many other videos throughout the years, but I adore this album cover, and I don't want it. I can get rid of your updated album cover of this. This is perfect. Anyway, the beginnings of Megadeth, when they were drunk and on drugs and firing on all cylinders and trying to compete with literally everybody in the world, including themselves, and they made this wacky thrash metal Jolt Cola fueled romp of a good time or something like that. And then on June 21st, arch nemesis of bands like Megadeth, Motley Crue with Theater of Pain. This came out on June 21st. Did I say that already? But this is the third Motley Crue album, and Honestly, it's out of the first three, it's the weakest one, but it had their biggest hit, which of course is Home Sweet Home. And Smoking in the Boys' Room was a hit off of this, but yeah, it's a cover song. And honestly, I thoroughly enjoy this album every time I put it on. And even though I think it's the weakest of the first three, it's still a really enjoyable 80s rock album. So, can't go wrong with that kind of shit. I mean, look at the fucking image on the back. See? Motley Crue at their most glammy on this one. And then on June 28th, the 10th album from AC/DC was released, Fly on the Wall. Once again, an album that I think gets very overshadowed by a few albums before, obviously Back in Black. And then For Those About to Rock was pretty successful as well. And then you had a few albums in the 80s where they didn't have big hits on them, but man, you put these fucking albums on and it's a good time every fucking time. Honestly, I don't even remember what the single was off of this album, but great album. If you don't know this album and you like the sound of AC/DC, guess what? You're going to dig this album as well. Okay, last but not least, on June 30th, 1985, the second album from Rat, Invasion of Your Privacy. I've done a couple of Rat album rankings at this point on my channel, and one thing I've learned is that people really love this album, and I can't really argue with them. I mean, it's got Lay It Down on it, which the main riff that starts the song off, that's gotta be in my top 10 guitar riffs of all time. Anyway, another good time 80s rock and roll album, Rat, Invasion of Your Privacy, came out in June of 1985. All right, so we have reached the end of June 1985. So now let's move forward 10 years. Welcome to 30 years ago this month, June 1995. And as usual, I'm going to be talking about a few albums that were released this month in 1995. This one has a little bit of a release date conflict, but all signs point to June 6th, 1995 for the release of this album right here, Tales from the Punch Bowl by Primus. Number one, I much prefer this album cover than the vinyl album cover. And so yeah, there are certain places on the internet where it does say that this album was released in May, but I know for sure that I got this album when it came out and it was summertime. So I'm going to go with June 6th, 1995. And I remember this was kind of a hard album for me to get into because I was a big fan of everything previous from Primus, but this was the first one where it took me several listens to really get into it. And honestly, I didn't and still don't really like Winona's Big Brown Beaver because it seemed kind of like an easy Primus song, and they were capable of and are capable of way better songs than that. But in the context of the album, it's a fun song. But I'm sorry. This is what we're looking at. This album cover for Tales from the Punch Bowl, released June 6th, 1995. All right, June 12th, 1995. Fugazi, Red Medicine was released. This was the first new Fugazi album that came out after I got into them, so this one was a big deal for me. And man, it's easily one of their best. There's so many fucking bangers on this album. And little did we know that after this, they would just release 2 more albums and then call it quits. And now in 2025, there's these rumors that are circulating that they kind of started themselves that there is going to be some kind of a reunion. In case you didn't know, there's a Discord Records Instagram page, and they did a post talking about how now a lot of old live Fugazi shows are available on streaming services. And in the caption, they're talking about the shows, and for the last show they ever played, they called it the last to date Fugazi show. To date. And everyone in the comments is like, to date? Interesting. So we'll see what happens with that. But way back in 1995, we didn't have to worry about that because we had brand new Fugazi, Red Medicine. Okay, last but not least, this says June 13th for this release date, which seems like it might be right or wrong. Who the fuck knows? And I don't have a vinyl of this one because there's only been one vinyl pressing and it's expensive as fuck and it's not even an original. But I have a cassette, an original cassette of Ugly Kid Joe, Menace to Sobriety. You know, every time I get a cassette out, we gotta open it up and we gotta do the little flippy. We gotta do. Oh, look at that. Oh, that feels good, doesn't it? Yeah. That's. Oh, then let's turn it around. Look at all that stuff. Yeah. And then can we get it back the right way? Oh shit. Can't. No, maybe not. Oh shit. Where does it? How does it? Oh, phew. Anyway, the second full-length album from Ugly Kid Joe, because remember they did Ugly as They Wanna Be, which was an EP, and then they did America's Least Wanted, which was their first full length, and then this one a couple years later, and this one was not as successful. And I guess it makes sense because I don't like it as much as the previous two, but there's still some fucking great tunes on this thing, man. Man, we did an Ugly Kid Joe album ranking 5 years ago. Where has the time gone? Where has the time gone for 5 years ago? Where has the time gone for 30 years ago, 40 years ago? Because that is it, everybody. This is the end of, well, just this episode. Not the end of everything. Not yet, anyway. The end of this particular episode of 40 years ago this month. You will see me again next month, and we will talk about July 1985. And in between these two times, there'll be other old head shit on here. So stay tuned. And go listen to Old Head Radio. Did you see that cool commercial at the beginning that I put together? Hope you liked it. And if you're listening to Old Head Radio, I hope you're enjoying it. Every time I see people listening on there, I'm very, very, very thankful. If you're all enjoying it, put a comment in, down below, or send me an email at oldheadnetwork@gmail.com. Is that right? oldheadpodcast@gmail.com. Oldhead Network. I need to get my shit together, everybody. oldheadnetwork.com is the website. You can send me an email through there as well, through the contact section. Okay, I'm getting the fuck out of here. I'm rambling too much. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you all again next month.